Now that you have defined data and application direction in phase C, you are ready to make the technology architecture decisions that turn that direction into stable, scalable, and secure enterprise foundations. Phase D is where enterprises either achieve platform coherence or drift into tool sprawl and inconsistent patterns that inflate cost and risk. Your goal is not to design every technical detail. Your goal is to set technology direction, standards, and guardrails so delivery teams can move fast while the enterprise maintains control over resilience, security, integration, and cost. Building on that goal, you should treat Phase D as platform strategy rather than a catalog of technologies. Technology architecture is the set of enterprise level decisions about infrastructure, cloud patterns, hosting models, integration platforms, security controls, and operational foundations that enable consistent delivery. If you treat Phase D as choosing tools, you will end up with fragmented platforms that are hard to govern. If you treat Phase D as defining enterprise platform direction, you will create reusable patterns that improve speed and reduce risk. In practical terms, Phase D answers leadership questions like what platforms are strategic, what must be standardized, and what guardrails protect the enterprise as teams deliver change. With the platform strategy mindset in place, you can define what success looks like. Success is when the enterprise has stable foundations that teams trust. Delivery moves quickly because guardrails reduce uncertainty, and security and resilience are built in rather than bolted on. Leaders want fewer incidents, more predictable cost, and reduced vendor dependency risk. Delivery teams want clarity on what to use and how to integrate without lengthy debates. Operations teams want consistent monitoring and operational readiness. Phase D is where you balance these needs through technology direction that is clear, practical, and enforceable. Now that success is clear, you need to make cloud architecture decisions that scale across the enterprise. This is not about cloud brand preference, it is about operating model fit and governance. You define cloud adoption principles such as secure default configurations, separation of environments, consistent identity and access, and standard logging and monitoring. You also define where cloud fits in the enterprise, such as public cloud, private cloud, hybrid, or multi-cloud, and why. In Phase D, you set the cloud platform direction so the enterprise does not become a collection of inconsistent cloud experiments that are expensive to operate and difficult to secure. With cloud direction established, you need a practical standardization approach. Standardization should focus on foundations that create long-term leverage, such as identity and access, network patterns, landing zone structures, monitoring and logging, and shared security controls. You avoid standardizing every detail because that destroys team autonomy and slows delivery. Your job is to decide what must be common to reduce risk and cost, and what can be flexible to encourage innovation. When you standardize the foundations, delivery becomes faster because teams reuse proven patterns. When you fail to standardize the foundations, teams spend months solving the same problems repeatedly and create inconsistent security and operational outcomes. Now that platform standardization is understood, you need connectivity direction because connectivity is one of the largest sources of operational complexity and security risk. You define enterprise patterns for segmentation, trusted boundaries, and secure connectivity between systems, environments, and partners. You clarify how services communicate, what is allowed across boundaries, and what monitoring must exist for visibility. You also define how remote access and administrative access are controlled because uncontrolled administrative paths become high-risk attack routes. In Phase D, you are setting guardrails that prevent accidental exposure and prevent the enterprise from building a fragile connectivity mesh that is impossible to troubleshoot. With connectivity direction in place, You need integration decisions because integration is where many enterprises accumulate hidden cost. When systems connect through ad hoc point-to-point integrations, you create fragile dependencies that break during change and slow delivery. In Phase D, you establish integration principles and preferred patterns so teams can integrate consistently. You decide when to use shared integration platforms, when to use application programming interfaces, and how to manage interoperability and versioning. Your goal is not to dictate a single technical method, but to create consistent integration outcomes. Traceability, reliability, scalability, and operational visibility. When integration direction is clear, delivery becomes faster because teams reuse patterns rather than negotiating integration from scratch in every program. Now that integration direction is clear, you need security architecture decisions that are platform level, not project level. Security should not be negotiated separately for every initiative. You define baseline security controls such as identity and access policies, encryption expectations, secrets management, logging and detection requirements, and secure configuration baselines. You also define how security assurance works, such as what must be reviewed and what evidence is required. When security is platform-based, teams move faster because security requirements are known upfront and reference patterns are available. When security is project-based, teams slow down because they must discover requirements late and redesign under pressure. Phase D is where you convert security from a delivery risk into a delivery enabler. With security framed correctly, you should treat identity and access as the anchor control that protects everything else. In real enterprises, most major security incidents involve identity compromise or privilege misuse. Phase D is where you establish consistent identity and access direction, including how authentication is strengthened, how privilege access is controlled, and how service identities are governed. You also clarify how access is reviewed and how exceptions are managed. This is not implementation detail, it is enterprise control design. When identity and access direction is clear and enforced, you reduce risk dramatically. And you simplify delivery because teams do not invent access patterns independently. Now that identity and access is anchored, you need resilience decisions because resilience is where leaders feel risk most sharply. Resilience is not only about being online, it is about maintaining business continuity through failures, incidents, and disruptions. In Phase D, you define resilience expectations based on business criticality, such as recovery time expectations, data recovery expectations, and dependency resilience. You also define patterns that support resilience, such as redundancy approaches and operational readiness expectations. When resilience decisions are unclear, teams underdesign and the enterprise suffers incidents. When resilience decisions are clear, teams design with the right level of protection, and leaders can accept trade-offs consciously. With resilience expectations clear, you need observability direction because you cannot operate what you cannot see. Observability includes monitoring, logging, alerting, and tracing patterns that allow operations teams to detect issues, investigate incidents, and prove compliance. In Phase D, you establish enterprise expectations for what must be monitored, what logs must exist, how long logs are retained, and how alerting is managed to avoid noise. Observability is also a governance tool because it provides evidence of control effectiveness and supports incident response. When observability is standardized, operations becomes faster and more reliable, and delivery teams spend less time diagnosing issues after release. Now that operations foundations are visible, you must address cost because cost is a form of risk and governance. In cloud environments, uncontrolled consumption becomes a budget shock and a leadership crisis. Phase D is where you set cost guardrails such as environment separation, resource standards, usage visibility, and accountability for consumption. You also define the principle that architecture choices should consider long term operational and licensing cost, not only delivery speed. When cost is governed early, leaders trust cloud adoption more. When cost is ignored, cloud adoption becomes politically unstable and governance becomes reactive and heavy handed. With the foundations defined, imagine you are setting phase D direction for a modern digital platform that serves customers across channels. You choose cloud patterns that support scalable delivery while enforcing consistent identity and access. You standardize platform foundations such as landing zone structures, network segmentation, and central observability. You define integration direction. So digital channels use stable interfaces rather than building point-to-point connections to every backend system. You establish security controls as platform features, including encryption expectations and strong identity and access policies. You set resilience expectations based on business criticality, and you build observability expectations so incidents can be detected and resolved quickly. The result is a platform environment where teams can deliver faster because the foundations are clear and reusable. Building on the digital platform example, consider an operational environment where safety, reliability, and constrained connectivity are central. You define secure segmentation and boundary controls to manage trusted zones and reduce exposure. You establish identity and access controls that protect privileged actions and enforce accountability. You define monitoring and logging expectations that support incident response while respecting operational constraints. You choose integration patterns that avoid fragile dependencies and provide controlled data exchange between operational systems and enterprise systems. In this environment, phase D decisions protect business continuity and safety while still enabling modernization at a pace the operational environment can tolerate. Now that you have seen examples, you need to prevent technology sprawl because sprawl is one of the fastest ways to increase cost and risk. You define a set of strategic platforms and preferred services that teams should use by default. You provide reference patterns so teams can adopt quickly. You define an exception process that is fast and transparent, so teams can deviate when there is a real constraint, but must document the risk and the plan to converge later. This approach makes governance fair and practical. It also prevents the enterprise from becoming a patchwork of tools that only the original team understands. With sprawl control understood, you connect phase D back to governance because technology direction must be enforceable. You translate technology architecture decisions into standards and guardrails such as identity and access requirements, network segmentation expectations, observability baselines, integration principles, and resilience targets. You define what evidence is required to show compliance and what triggers deeper review. You also ensure the exception process works as a safety valve. When phase D is connected to governance, delivery becomes faster because teams know the rules early and can design confidently. When phase D is disconnected from governance, the architecture becomes advice and drift becomes normal. Let's now discuss the key takeaways from what you learned so far so you can apply it immediately. You learned that phase D technology architecture is platform strategy, not a shopping list, and it exists to create stable foundations that enable speed and safety together. You learned that your leadership goal is to set enterprise technology direction and guardrails across cloud, platforms, connectivity, integration, and security so teams can deliver consistently. You learned that standardizing foundational controls such as identity and access, network patterns, observability, and security baselines reduces risk and cost while accelerating delivery through reuse. You learned how integration direction prevents point-to-point fragility and improves reliability and maintainability. You learned that resilience and observability are core enterprise capabilities because they determine whether the organization can operate and recover during incidents. You learned that cost governance must be built into technology, architecture decisions, because uncontrolled cloud spend becomes a leadership problem. Finally, you learned that Phase D only works when it is connected to governance through clear standards, evidence, and a transparent exception process that prevents sprawl without blocking delivery. Now that you know how to run Phase D technology architecture as a practical guide for cloud, platforms, integration, and security decisions, you are ready to build foundations that teams trust and leaders can govern. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your architecture and delivery peers, and comment with the one technology foundation in your organization that causes the most pain today, such as identity and access, integration complexity, or lack of observability, and what impact it is having on delivery and risk.